And once again, we are speaking this morning with Dr. Sankalp Sharma, the Assistant Professor of Agribusiness, Kent State Tuscarawas. Good morning, Dr. Sharma.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. It's good to have you with us today as we talk a little agribusiness, which obviously is very important to our community. So let's get it in the context of what's going on at Kent State Tuscarawas in the agribusiness program as we're kind of in this different era, I guess. But what exactly is happening in the agribusiness program?
You were absolutely correct. It's a whole new paradigm for all of us. And I think one of the things that we have been trying to basically do ever since, probably the last spring is try to be as adaptable as possible and ensure that the students basically get the same experience as they would prior to, the pandemic happening. So the program itself, it's a 4-year program fully offered at the Tusc campus. And basically the theme of our program is it's a combination of business principles, economics, and accounting, but basically viewed through this lens of agriculture. Okay? Mm-hmm. So our main goal is to be as applied as possible. And we realize that, COVID has sort of changed that, but the fundamental idea pretty much remains the same because most of our students directly come from farming backgrounds, and the ones who don't, although at least the data that we are seeing, that's not a lot, but there are still a few, they basically want to be able to either go back to their farms after studying with us, or they want to be, joining some agribusiness. Mm-hmm. So basically what we want to do is we want to provide all our students, all the avenues. So if you want to go back to your farm with the applied knowledge, which we are already seeing, we have a lot of post-graduation data which shows that they're doing that. And if you want to work for a company, which we also have some alumni who are doing that, a lot of local companies, you can do that. And then, for the extra enthusiasts, let's say, people who want to, study higher, they want to do their master's, let's say an MBA with a emphasis on agribusiness. Our program, in fact, prepares students to do that as well. And what we have been able to do, at least I have been able to do specifically, is that we are trying to really be as integrated as possible because COVID sort of disrupted our in-person teaching, but we have fully adapted and we are being as comprehensive with our remote as well. Although I'm hopeful that going forward, at least the fall 2021, everything will be back to normal in terms of in-person teaching. And even now this semester, I'm doing in-person classes and I'm hoping to just fully transition back to in-person because, Ag is a very applied course and that face-to-face experience, especially with some of these business and economics principles, is very important.
No question about that. And agribusiness is so wide-reaching. Without going into great detail, there's so many different areas that we can talk about, and it affects world policies, and so there's a lot to absorb there, I would imagine, right?
No, absolutely. And just take a look at just some of the simple things because so I'll give you an example. In spring, I beg your pardon, fall last year, there's a specific course in the program, and this is a slightly upper-level course, just a seminar course, and we basically talk about all the current issues in agribusiness and specifically with U.S. agriculture. So two things that we sort of looked at immediately was the impact of COVID on the food supply chain. So I don't know if you caught wind of it through the media, but back in last spring, when we had this thing to sort of drop on our heads with the pandemic, that immediately, created a massive shock for the supply chains, food supply chains across the country. Now, unfortunately, people tended to focus on things like toilet paper, but what was happening behind the scenes was a massive disruption, for example, in the meat supply chain.
Yes.
Now, those are things that people will catch on either through direct experience when they go through the grocery store, or for people like us who actually look at the massive impact it had on commodity prices. So if you look at some of those livestock price charts, you see that blip. And that's the kind of interesting stuff that we really want to give to our students so that they actually see what's happening behind the scenes. And then even before like the pandemic actually happened, there was this massive sort of trade war brewing between, let's say, the United States and China. And then we talked about that as well, and how the one place where the U.S. sort of can be hurt is our agricultural exports, because for all other things, like, normal goods and regular goods, U.S. is a net buyer. So usually we have a lot of leverage. But agriculture is one area where our farmers specifically rely on other markets to make not their living, but certainly to enhance their profits. And that was this big dynamic change prior to the pandemic. So from 2018, 2019, where we have been having this trade issues, and we talked about that too. So, yep.
Yeah, that's a lot to try to take in and realize what's going on. So most of these people, like you said, come from an agricultural background. I'm sure they love the lifestyle, and it's just something that they don't ever want to get away from, which leads to you also have an agribusiness club. What does a club member do with your agribusiness club there?
So, yeah, that's it's very interesting because, like, when I first started out, I sort of realized that because it's a small school and, it's a small community, it's important to have that community feel with the students themselves. And in fact, it was the students who basically were like, hey, Dr. Sharma, we really should, get together, and we need to start thinking of stuff to do outside the classroom, basically. So the club is run by the students. We run a very democratic style organization, and unless there are some executive decisions about the budget and stuff, we have a president and treasurer and all of that stuff. And the goal, it's a twofold goal, basically. So we want to offer the students the opportunity to see why they're taking their agribusiness courses. So, for example, through farm trips. So I remember in spring of 2019, we actually went to certified Angus beef. And that was a great trip because a lot of the stuff we actually saw there that was happening there, we actually talked about in the class. So I noticed that the students really appreciated that. The farm trips are basically very important too, in a way, because it re-emphasizes why students take our program, and it certainly helps them to relate with stuff. And then the second point is we try to do as much community service as possible. And I will admit that perhaps we don't have a lot of manpower for it, but we certainly try and raise funds and then donate to charity. So this is something that we have been doing. Now, admittedly, that did slow down in fall 2020 because of COVID, but we are revamping back up this spring, and hopefully, by the end of this semester specifically, we would have gone back to what we had prior to the pandemic. So I remember we donated a lot of money, for example, and not just money, but actual goods when the Nebraska floods happened in 2019. So, yep.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, thanks for filling us in on that. If somebody's interested in maybe having this as their study major, they're a high school student, or they're the parent of a high school student who thinks that might be the way to go, how would they get a hold of you or the program and get more information?
So it's very simple. Wherever you're located, I want you to type just 3 words. Just type Agribusiness Kent State, and the first link you see on Google is all our information you need.
Cool.
So my information is provided, and everything about the program that you need to see is right there.
Couldn't be any easier, right?
Yep.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Very interesting stuff.
Thank you so much for having me.
We do appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That is Dr. Sankalp Sharma, the Assistant Professor of Agribusiness at Kent State Tuscarawas, on Tusc Talks this morning on our 8:30 high beam on the BT Morning Show.